Hey, ladies, and welcome back to the Rooted Mama podcast. Now, I don't know if it's just me, but like when you're scrolling through Instagram, or like at least when I'm scrolling through Instagram or Facebook or any of the socials, I get so pissed off when I fall for one of the ads. Like I'm just scrolling, minding my business, and then I see something like super interesting and I'm like paying attention to it. And then I realize it says suggested for you or like paid ad. And it just kind of like pisses me off because I'm like, I thought I was smarter than this. Like, how did I fall for this? And again, like, I don't know if it's just me, but it's just like a personal thing that I don't like the predatory way in which the ads are being selected on these social media platforms, even if they're like actually reasonable and like helpful to me. But it made me think about something that continuously comes up in our world as future mothers and mothers, and that's conflicts of interest. So, we're going to talk about that today.
Welcome to The Rooted Mama, the podcast where motherhood meets wisdom, support, and empowerment. I'm Destiny, a mother on a mission to help women embrace a healed and fulfilling version of motherhood. Whether you're planning for your first baby, navigating pregnancy, or already deep in the parenting journey, each episode features real conversations with women in every stage of motherhood, insights from experts, and practical tips to help you feel grounded and confident.
All right, so y'all know me at this point. Like, my big thing is for mothers to be as informed as possible. And something that continuously comes up in the scientific community, especially in our country, is that there are decisions and recommendations being made by people who have conflicts of interest. And basically, what that means, like, I'm sure y'all know, but like, basically, what that means is that there is something that there may be a way that they're benefiting from whatever they're doing. So, perfect example is if a doctor was getting paid by a pharmaceutical company and then recommended that same product to their patients. Or worse, they did a study that said that this product was safe, but they were getting funded by the pharmaceutical company. So, they are supposed to disclose those conflicts of interest. Like there's actually a place for it. There, I think it's like a law, and it's all for ethics. So they're supposed to tell you if there's any conflicts of interest, so that when you read their study or you listen to their recommendation, you know what's going on behind the scenes. A lot of times this is done. Like I'm not saying it's not, but it's not done in the way that we would like it to be done. Not always. And so I'm gonna go through a few examples so that you have a better, like you can feel like you have some control over this. Like you can feel like you know where to look, you know how to do this research, because I'm always saying do research. And there's always people out there who are like, do your own research, do your own research. And what I thought about is that what if you don't know what you're looking for, right? So it's one thing to just like go on Google and type in whatever the product is that your doctor is recommending, or like whatever the technique is, or whatever. It's another thing to know that what's coming up on the Google searches are likely going to be funneled or filtered or cherry picked by people who are funding, these platforms and stuff. And I know this because I'm in the middle of establishing my business. So I would pay Google to run ads on Google, right? And the more money you pay, there's also the clout that you get to your website. If you pay a certain amount in ads, that's going to drive a lot of traffic to your website, right? And then the more traffic that you get to your website, the higher you climb in the ranks on Google. So not long after you have done all of this, you'll find that you're starting to rank higher for certain search terms. This is all legit. Like this is something that I'm paying attention to, like with my own business, trying to get seen and trying to like be seen as valid in the world that we're living in, especially in the US. So I know this to be true. Okay. And then, so that's Google, that's just the Google search. But then also there's the actual research. And that's what we're going to talk about next. But I want to do this in the right order so that it's not confusing and it makes the most sense. I was talking to a friend who is in the medical world, and she was kind of like approaching me about something that I said about epidurals. And I said in a podcast with a breastfeeding specialist that babies can be impacted by medications in birth like epidurals. So they can become a little bit more lethargic, maybe they're a little sleepier, and they're not willing to like latch onto their mother specifically for breastfeeding immediately, whereas another baby might, right? Who hasn't been exposed to these medications. And this friend was saying like this is not the case, like she brought up certain studies. And so I went to the evidence-based birth website, and I highly encourage you to check it out because it is a wealth of knowledge. So I went to that website and I looked up the effects of epidurals on breastfeeding, and instead of reading what she had to say, I went straight to the resource section and started to click through the studies that she cited. And the first study that I found was done by a group of researchers, and most of them were anesthesiologists. Some of them were gynecologists as well. And at the time, I wasn't looking for like who funded these people or anything. I just wanted to see what the study said. And it basically said that fentanyl, which is in epidurals, like a lot of epidurals, there are epidurals without fentanyl, full disclosure, but there are some that are in it. And so it was looking at the dosage of fentanyl and its impact on the longevity of breastfeeding in mothers. There were three different groups. Like one of them had high, one of them was like less, one of them was none at all. And they said that there was no significant difference. Like they all breastfeed for the same amount of time up to 6 weeks. And so at face value, you're like, okay, like clearly this doesn't like fentanyl and epidurals like doesn't impact babies. But if you go to the methodology, like what they were doing, how they were measuring it, a huge red flag popped out immediately, and it said they looked at mothers who had already successfully breastfed babies before. If you don't understand why this is a big red flag, mothers who are already mothers who are choosing to breastfeed, whether they were successful or not, are going to be more likely to stick with it the second time around, whether it be because they already did it before and they know they can, or because they failed the first time. Like maybe they only got to 6 weeks, but they want to get to a year. So, like that first 6 weeks is a breeze to them, right? So, looking at mothers, like women who are already mothers and already like tried breastfeeding before, is not a good collection of people to look at, if that makes sense. Like I hope that makes sense for anyone who's listening who like doesn't really understand research and stuff. Like you have to be careful who you select to be in these studies. Like it has to make sense. My thing would be for first time mothers. Like I would want to look at them because they're a blank slate and you'll see more accurate results from there, at least to me. But I'm just a lowly podcaster. Okay. So because I saw that like manipulated response or the results were like iffy, I wanted to know who was funding these people. That's just like my first inclination now that I know this. And so I'm going to show you how I did that. So I found their names. When you go to the research page, like they always show who these people are, and they go in order from like the main contributor, like the main person who did it, and then it has like others who helped like in her group or in their group. And I went to the first person and looked at like where she was from. Most of them were from different medical schools or like hospital medical schools, right? So like I think about UConn Health Center, like that kind of thing. They weren't from UConn, but that sort of vibe, right? And so that's the first thing, like knowing where they're coming from. The next thing is looking at something called open payments. So basically what open payments does, it's a website. There's a longer version of it. You could just type in open payments, it should come up. But basically what it does is show you how there are financial relationships between drug and medical device companies and healthcare providers. So basically whenever one of these companies pays a provider for whatever type of service that they provide, they will document it and then it shows up on this database. And just in case you are wondering, this year, or actually in 2023, $12.6 billion was paid by companies to providers. Now, it could be for many different things, and I'll kind of like go over them, but that's a lot of money, don't you think? Like, don't they have salaries already? Like, just think about that, okay? But some of the things that they may pay for are like general payments. So, like, if they went to a conference, maybe they like on their dime, maybe they'll pay for their food, for their lodging, for their travel. if there was a speaking engagement, they may pay for that. There also are research payments, and that usually is directly to the doctor or to the lead researcher. It'll go directly to them. Then there's also something called associated research. Like, for example, I talked about UConn, right? So if there was a doctor who was like the lead researcher at UConn, they would still show up under these associated research payments. And that usually is like the biggest for some of these doctors that I'll talk about. I will say that not everyone, not every doctor is going to show up, because some of these names are like super generic, and like if you don't know their exact name, then you may not be able to find them. But like I basically will look for the most unique doctors first, like their names, because usually when I type it in, there's no confusion. There's not like a Michael C and a Michael F. Like that's not the case. And so I found someone called Paloma Toledo. She was one of the authors. And in December of 2022, she received $3,430 for consulting. And I'm putting it in quotes, consulting. Okay. And the company who paid her was Pacira Pharmaceuticals. And basically, what they do is they have like medical devices for pain management. And if you remember, the study that we were looking at was for epidurals, which is a form of pain management. Now, this may be really not a big deal, right? I'm not saying that she is getting paid by Pacira to do this. I don't even think they have like products that are used in epidurals, but I just wanted to like show you how easily you can find out who's being paid by who and how this could potentially be a conflict of interest. Okay. That's like on the low side of how there could be a conflict of interest. And we're going to like go up a ladder from least to most. So like here, I mean, you want nothing. You want a researcher who has no conflicts of interest, not being paid by pharmaceuticals in any way, shape, or form. Like no lunches, like nothing. You want someone who's doing research for the safety of what's going in you and your baby's body, to have zero conflicts of interest, no ties to pharmaceutical companies. Like that's just me. I don't want anything, right? But that's low level compared to what I'm about to tell you. Okay. So let's move up the ladder. And now we're going to move to advisory boards, because they play a huge part, especially in America, in the decisions that are being made across the country. Before I like fully start talking about ACOG, which is the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, I want to emphasize, like, for this past person and like the people going forward that we'll talk about, it's very important to give disclosure when you have these conflicts of interest. And sometimes they do. So, like, if they're writing something for like whatever college or like whatever, maybe they'll say, oh, I work for this college, right? Okay, that's fine. Like, you could work for the college and do research about it, like whatever, okay? But often they do not disclose the payments they've received from companies that would benefit from the research that they're putting out. Okay. And it gets more insidious as we go along, like I said. So we're talking about ACOG, and they basically function as giving the gold standard for treatment when it comes to women's health, like everything to do with women's health, not just treatment, like everything to do with women's health. And they have, a side that's for the physicians and the medical professionals, and they also have a side that's for patients. And I really want to focus on the patient side, because they have something called it's called Ask ACOG, and it's basically a resource for patients to go and find out information that would be helpful for them. So, like, if you're trying to decide which birth control to use, whether you should use birth control, what to do when you get pregnant, it has all of these kind of like fact style blog posts where like you'll have a specific question, and then an expert will answer that question. And most of the time, the expert is a board certified OBGYN, right? Now, there is one person that I want to pay attention to, but first, I want to point out that if you were to go to this website, and I encourage you to, like, the whole point of this podcast is to breed independence, autonomy, and critical thinking. So, as I bring stuff up, please go look into it yourself. I know it takes a lot of time, but like it takes so much more time to recover from an unnecessary intervention or to build yourself back up after you have like a traumatic experience, like somewhere in life, right? So do it now so that you don't have to do it later when you're like feeling broken, hurt, whatever. Like do it before. How hard is it? How much time do you spend looking at Love on the Spectrum or whatever, right? Like, okay. So I encourage you to look this stuff up. So there is a list of experts that they refer to on the ACOG website. And I want to read exactly what it says because this is important. It says, meet the experts. All of the health information on this website is reviewed or written by OBGYNs and other healthcare professionals. Get to know the team of experts, reviewers, and contributors. Something that I wanted to specifically focus on in this little blurb is that it says all OBGYN reviewers and contributors are ACOG fellows. These are OBGYNs who have met high ethical and professional standards. Okay? High ethical and professional standards. So we're going to expect everyone on this list to disclose all of their conflicts of interest because they have high ethical and professional standards. Okay, so I mentioned the Ask ACOG like section of this website, and it gives a bunch of blog posts about a variety of topics. And one of those topics is birth control. And there is an expert that gives her view of birth control. Her name is Dr. Nicole Carjane, and she wrote this blog post titled, What I Wish All Teens Knew About Long Acting Birth Control. Okay. And one of the things that really bugs me is that I looked her up and immediately saw how she had a conflict of interest, which I'll talk about in a second. But in this blog post, she hypes long acting birth control, which is like an implant, right? You can get like the Nexplanon, like the implant in your arm, or you can get like the IUDs, but basically like any form of birth control that essentially is like infused into your body in some way. That's what she is recommending. And then she actually talks about like the benefits. But something that stood out to me, and again, maybe I just have the eye for it at this point, like I've seen so many numbers, I've done so much research, was that when she talked about why there's hesitancy among teens to get these long acting birth controls, she mentioned the risk of adverse reactions, right? Like things that could go wrong, risk of side effects. And she said it was only 1 in 100. Only 1 in 100. Now, I don't know if you understand numbers, but just to give an example, typically if someone has a breech birth, so like a baby that has their legs down instead of their head, they will almost always recommend a C-section because of the risk that is associated with a breech vaginal birth. But here's the interesting thing. The risk of serious, like bad effects for a breech birth is 1 in 100. I mean, there were some others that said like 1 in 50, like depending on the scenario around it, maybe the mother's health, like overall, like poor positioning, but like the risk of something going wrong, they say, is 1 in 100. Now, I believe it to be way lower than that. Like, I've seen so many home births that are breech births, and like Dr. Stu Fishbein of Birthing Instincts talks a lot about breech births. So, like, if you're just curious and want to go on that rabbit hole dive, like, look into Birthing Instincts because he talks a lot about the safety of breech and talks about breech home births all the time. But I just thought that was interesting to see her say only 1 in 100. Like, and then I know that on the opposite end, if I go to another article about trying to have a vaginal breech birth, they'll say the risk is too high. Like, so already that is a red flag. So once I saw that, I'm like, okay, let's go look and see who's paying this lady because there's got to be somebody. So I head over to open payments and I type her name in and she comes up right away. We know that it's her, the same little middle initial and where she's working at. And right away, I see that from the year 2017 to 2023, she received $27,078 from pharmaceutical companies. And when I go to look at who she primarily received from, it's a company called Organon. Now, you may not know who that is, so let me tell you. Organon is a company, a pharmaceutical company, and if you go to their website, The first thing it says is Organon, here for her health. We are an independent global healthcare company with a strategy to improve the health of women throughout their lives. And their biggest product, or at least in our world, when it comes to obstetrics, gynecology, their biggest product is none other than Nexplanon. So I go and I click on just like the very first payment that I see listed here under general payments from Organon. It was $1,300. I click on it, and she received $1,375 on July 3rd, 2023 from Organon. And when you go all the way to the bottom, it says Associated Products, Nexplanon. Right there. I mean, y'all, it's I know that it sounds like complicated, but it actually isn't once you know where to look. And this woman received money from a pharmaceutical company, and the associated product was Nexplanon, which is a long-term birth control. And if you continue to look at all the other payments, even the smallest ones, even the ones that are just like $40 for food and beverage, that's what it says, food and beverage. When you click on it, it says she received $42 on June 28th, 2023, under the associated product Nexplanon. Now, I don't know why she's receiving it. It honestly could be harmless. Like, it could be her just like going to a conference where they talked about it, or like whatever, maybe sitting down with a pharmaceutical rep who's like talking about the updates on Nexplanon. Like, it doesn't actually matter. She may not be a criminal. She may not be trying to like harm women. But the point is, she wrote an article on ACOG saying how great it is to give teens long-term birth control. Like I understand, like, someone who's a medical professional who's listening, who says like, oh, this happens all the time, but they're still good people or whatever. Like, I'm not saying that. Like, she's on the ACOG website recommending a certain birth control that she's received money for some reason. And the people, like, this is the gold standard. This is where people go, both physician and patient, to find out like what they should do. When they type in Google search, like, I'm a teen and should I take this birth control? They're going to see, oh, surely, like, this person, Nicole Carnjane, who's, a medical professional and an ACOG fellow, she recommended this. So it's obviously fine, right? Like, I hope that this makes sense, and like I don't sound like I have a tinfoil hat or something, right? Like, once you see it, it's hard to unsee. Okay, so that is like middle tier. I'm gonna move on because like I'm not trying to like harass these people or anything like that, but I just want to point out, like, there should be some disclosure there. If you're going to recommend these products, like, you should be forced to disclose that you've received like 30 grand from a company who creates these products. And just to be thorough, I read through that entire article, scrolled to the bottom to look and see, does she mention this payment received by Organon, the creator of Nexplanon? And wouldn't you know it, she doesn't mention it. She just talks about her being a clinical fellow, where she got her degree, whatever, but it doesn't talk about what's most important, which is that she received payment from someone who benefits from her writing this article. Okay, now, like I said, this is middle tier, so let's move on to the worst possible case, okay? And this person is, in fact, listed on the current list of experts, and her name is Rebecca Cohen. Now, Rebecca Cohen, listen, God is going to handle people. I don't have to handle people, but let me tell you all of the nonsense that's going on in her world. Okay, so she, of all the doctors I searched, was the one that blew my mind the most. And like, I'll be honest, it's really hard to blow my mind at this point. Like, in 2025, very hard to blow Destiny's mind, but she did it, and that's because she worked. How am I even going to say this? Okay, where to begin? She is found in Colorado. She works primarily with the University of Colorado, okay? And she likes to do research. I think it's because she works for the University of Colorado. And she works primarily in the reproductive health space. And she is listed as a doctor at a specific clinic. It's called the CU Family Planning Clinic, and it's out of use. Like, it's kind of weird because it says CU, but like it's the University of Colorado. It's all the same place. This is a Title 10 funded facility. And if you don't know what that is, Title 10, I'm sure you've heard of Title 9 like a bunch of times in the media over the course of the last couple of years because of like the trans stuff, but Title 10 is another program that's specifically for getting reproductive health and family planning healthcare to people who are poor, like don't have access to insurance, like just low income people who we would all care about, right? Like we would want these people to have adequate access to healthcare. So that's what this Title 10 is for. So she works in a facility that is funded by Title 10, which means it is funded by federal money, which means our tax dollars. Okay. And I want to clarify because we need like total transparency when talking about this sort of stuff because it can be like easily manipulated and it gets confusing. Title 10 doesn't pay for research, but it does pay for like the salaries of the facilities, and it does pay for the contraceptives. So anything relating to family planning and reproductive health, it does pay for, although it does not pay for abortions. Okay, so just like to clarify and make it crystal clear like what it funds and what it doesn't. Now, as I said before, Rebecca Cohen, Dr. Cohen, she does a lot of research. I don't know if she's like actively, like she's the one with the hands on, but she is definitely authoring a bunch of research. And again, she works for a university, so that's not uncommon. And I'm sure she needs funding for this research. And here's where the first problem for me lies. She's getting a lot of money from pharmaceutical companies. And the biggest issue is that Organon is one of her biggest funders. In fact, let me pull this up. In fact, Organon paid Dr. Cohen on June 24th, 2021, $41,000 in a one-time payment. One-time payment. She was paid $41,000. And when you go and look at what it was for a research study. And this research study is titled Nexplanon Use in Women Primarily Choosing a Combined Oral Contraceptive, a multi-center trial. So it looks like she was being paid to do a pharmaceutical trial. Like, I mean, I just read it. I might be a little bit slow here, y'all, but like, this is what I just read. What do you think? Right? So she was being funded. So she was being paid by Organon, the pharmaceutical company who produces Nexplanon, to do a clinical trial on Nexplanon use. Okay, fine. Like, they need doctors to do, like, they need researchers to do this, right? They need other people. Like, they can't just do it all on their own. I'm sure. I mean, they make billions of dollars, so they should. But like, they can't just do it on. Maybe they need a bunch of people like to get a giant sample size and make sure that it's like really, really legit. But I automatically have pause because this woman works in, first of all, a university, right? But then second, in a clinic that is working with primarily underserved young women. And she's doing clinical trials for a pharmaceutical company in these women. Like, and they can, like, don't get me wrong, I went to the website and they're fairly transparent about the fact that they do studies. Like, they're looking for people to join in. Like, they say, if you would like to be a part of the study, yada yada yada, right? But it just makes me feel icky. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but it just, my instincts don't feel good listening to this or like reading this. And I wonder, like, let me know, comment, send me a DM. Like, what do you feel about this part? Because already that's like kind of problematic to me. Okay, so that's one part. So that's just one study. But when you go to her profile, so like you could just type in a doctor and like look at, like, if you go to the University of Colorado and you look at like her profile, you could find a bunch of her studies, like the studies that she's authored. And a couple of them stand out to me that are separate from doing clinical trials. They talk about like the longevity of use in young women for like long-term birth control, and it talks about like the psychology behind what's making them hesitant about taking birth control. And again, like on the surface, she's a reproductive health doctor. Like, is it that nefarious? Is it a problem? But it becomes a problem when she's doing research that has to do with the products that these companies are producing, right? Like she's talking about a long acting birth control, and she's looking at the psychology behind it and like how to encourage uptake among young women, among teens. Like she's encouraging it. Obviously, she works at a reproductive health clinic, right? So can you see how that becomes messy when she's receiving money for these things? And like again, it could be nothing, but when I go to the main page and I type in all years like that are on record, I can see that Dr. Cohen received in general payments $3,576, and like not from Organon alone, but just like an overview of all the money she's received. For direct research payments, she's received $41,000, and for associated research funding, she received $337 million, almost 338 because it's 941 after that. Okay, millions of dollars. And again, under associated research doesn't mean that she's getting it in her pocket, but it just means that she's associated with wherever this funding was going. So it could be that she was the lead investigator, and maybe there were understudies who were actually doing the research, but regardless, like her name is attached to this money, right? So let's go on to the next problem, which is kind of like twofold. I don't know if you remember, but Dr. Cohen is on the ACOG list of experts, which means she is a contributor and reviewer to the things that are on the ACOG website. Do you want somebody who's receiving millions of dollars in whether it's direct or indirect funding from pharmaceutical companies reviewing and advising or anything? Like, let's like, do we? Because it's one thing if you like just believe in it blindly, but again, think about those influencers, think about the paid ads. Like, someone is benefiting from these things, like for someone to be influenced this way. And again, Dr. Cohen, from what I saw, has not disclosed any of these conflicts of interest on any of the papers that she's written, anywhere on her profiles and all the places that she worked. She never says, by the way, I indirectly received $337 million from Organon and Merck and whatever else is listed on her website. I remember Organon and Merck. Okay, so that's a problem. And then the second part, which is like closely tied to that, is that she actually has a study where she, like a published study where she talks about how medical students should be taught and like the selection process of medical students. And she's talking about it in terms of abortion training. So like she's talking about how medical students who desire to like have good abortion training should be able to go to, X, Y, and Z. So my problem is not necessarily like what she's talking about with abortion or anything like that. Although I don't agree with abortion, the problem is that she is writing papers that influence the way that medical students are taught. Like she's giving that insight to try and change the way medical schools and like their decision making processes. And this is the part that I really, really wanted to highlight. She's not alone here. Like I'm just using an example. But when you have contributors and ACOG fellows and all this stuff, and doctors who are flat out writing papers about the future of medical schools, we have a huge problem. We have a massive problem. And I didn't even get to what funding the schools themselves get. Like you can type into open payments and you can see some of the grants and things that Pfizer and all these other big companies are giving to medical schools, to hospitals. Like look it up yourself. Like do yourself a favor and just do Pfizer because it's easy. Like you don't need to like find Organon, like these tiny little, they're not tiny, they make a lot of money, but like these tiny little unknown subsidiaries of big companies. Like type in the big ones and see where they're paying because it goes back and forth. You can look at the company, like what they're paying, and you can look at the doctors, what they're receiving. So do yourself a favor and look, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And again, If you support all of this, fine. But for me, when you're telling me that I need to trust the experts and like follow research and trust research, that research better be crystal clear. It better not have a single pharmaceutical pinky on it. Because if you're telling me that I'm supposed to take an epidural or do X, Y, and Z, and you're telling me that it's safe, but it's got the blood of pharmaceutical companies all over it, I don't want any part of it. And you shouldn't either. Sometimes I just need to like, I'm sorry, y'all. Like, this fires me up because I used to work in healthcare. Like, I used to work in the hospital. I'm a licensed speech language pathologist, which means I'm like pseudo healthcare, like, depending on where you work or whatever. And so, like, I have many medical friends, like, many medical friends. And I know, and family members too. And I know that they have our best interest at heart. Like, they are just trying to take care of people. Like, I don't know that many doctors besides like Dr. Death who literally wants to hurt their patients. Like, that just is not the case. But the problem is not the lowly like worker bees. Like, they're not your aunt who's a nurse, right? It's not your mom who's an APRN. Like, those people are just kind of doing what they think are best, and like they go and they often like go to databases. They refer back to their textbooks and their training. And if the training itself is tainted or their advisors are bought off by pharmaceutical companies, they're thinking the information is correct and accurate and like most up to date and evidence based, but it's actually tainted because the uppers are influenced by outside hands. And this is the part that I think is the hardest to get them to acknowledge and understand. Like, this is like I said, I've had conversations with my friends about it, and they just don't want to believe that it's this corrupt. But it's not that, like, it's not about belief. Like, I believe in Jesus Christ. I've never seen Jesus for myself. I believe that he died on the cross and rose again. I didn't see that myself. This is all about faith and belief. When we're talking about these topics like corruption in medical care, it's not about a belief, it's facts. I just told you exactly how to find out who's funded by who. Like, within seconds, you can go on a website, type in their name, and find out where the money's coming from. This is not about belief. And if you're trying to find out what doctor or researcher was funded by, I don't know, Pfizer or whatever, you look and see, you type their name in, you get the funding, you see how much they were funded, and then you go into Google and then you type in studies by this person, studies authored by this person. Look up the studies. When the studies tell you that it's safe and effective, yada, 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 well, now you know that that person received $3.7 million from Pfizer Inc. And now they're writing a study on how this thing is safe and effective. Now, listen, this kind of stuff on paper really seems harmless, and maybe it is, but I want to give you a real world example. So, think about a bride, whether you are the bride or a friend of the bride, and there's someone in the family who offers to pay for part of the wedding, and you're so grateful. Like, the bride is so grateful, right? But then you start to feel this subtle pressure. Suddenly, their opinions about the guest list or the venue or the colors carry a lot more weight because they're giving you money. Even if they say, no, it's your day, do whatever you want, you're still going to feel that pull to keep them happy. And that's exactly the kind of dynamic I'm talking about when it comes to these conflicts of interest in healthcare and especially in research. And we hold these people to such high standards and we want to believe that they're always going to make the right decision, but they're still human. Like, the good thing is that they are still human. But here's the thing, a doctor or researcher might still believe they're making independent decisions. But when there's money involved, especially like millions of dollars, even if it's just for funding for research, that relationship can quietly influence how they think, what they publish, and then ultimately what they recommend to the public. Whew. Okay. I think that's it for today. Like, I think I've had enough because I'm still disgusted by a couple of these friends here, but I hope that that helps. And again, like, it's not supposed to scare you, it's not supposed to make you overwhelmed, but it is supposed to make you question things more closely because, again, you're making decisions that last forever sometimes, especially when it comes to pregnancy and birth, but especially when you're talking about newborn babies. They're coming out beautiful, healthy, whole, untouched. And then very quickly, you're having to make decisions about them. And you're looking at research that very well could be tainted by conflicts of interest. So, what do you think about that? All right, so let's end it here. We have a couple more episodes coming up. There's two more. It's going to be next week. It's going to be the first half of our birth stories with our miscarriage and then my daughter's birth. The final episode will be on our free birth and everything related to our son's birth. And then, like I said, I'm taking a break. We're moving on to our homestead, and then I'll be back hopefully. We'll see. We'll see how fast I can come back. I said fall so that I can have enough time, but it could be quicker than that. Like, I don't know if I could stay away from y'all that long. So I'm definitely taking a break. I just don't know how long it'll be. And then we'll jump into mental health and survivor mode and all of the things that I talked about in the podcast about survivor mode. Okay. I'll see y'all when I see y'all.
Thank you for tuning in to The Rooted Mama. I hope today's episode left you feeling inspired, supported, and a little more rooted in your own motherhood journey. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another mama or mama-to-be. Remember, motherhood is a journey best shared, so let's keep growing together. Until next time, stay strong, stay supported, and stay deeply rooted.